You are listening to Blackout Radio, and we are interrupting our regular programming right now because something significant has just happened. Something that our seismic monitoring partners have flagged in the last 4 minutes, and we want to be transparent with you as the picture becomes clearer. At approximately 6:47 this morning, local time in the nation of Caldina, a major seismic event registered across our monitoring network. Preliminary readings from the Veldrick Seismic Observatory are placing the magnitude at somewhere between 8.7 and 9.1, with the epicenter located approximately 52 kilometers off the northern coast of Caldina in the Veldrick Sea. I want to stress, these are preliminary numbers. They will be revised. But we are talking about a potentially catastrophic earthquake, and Blackout Radio is going to stay with this story all day. My name is Daniel Voss.
And I'm Maya Ross. Daniel, the moment our producer flagged this, I felt my stomach drop, and I think that reaction is completely appropriate given what we're starting to understand about the scale of this. The northern coast of Caldina, for listeners who may not be immediately familiar, is one of the most densely populated coastal corridors in this part of the world. The city of Meerut, which is the capital, sits right on that northern shoreline. And when we talk about a magnitude in the high 8s or 9s, we are talking about a level of ground shaking that most modern buildings are not designed to survive without significant damage. We don't yet know what conditions on the ground look like. We don't yet have images or audio from Meerut, but I keep thinking about the people waking up to that. The families eating breakfast, the school children, the city that was entirely ordinary 4 minutes ago.
And that geography matters enormously in understanding what comes next. The Veldrick Sea is a semi-enclosed body of water, roughly 400 kilometers across at its widest point. The nations surrounding it include Caldina to the south, Verath to the east, and the island nation of Solen, which sits almost precisely in the center of the sea. Now, when you have a submarine earthquake of this magnitude in an enclosed body of water, the concern that immediately rises for seismologists and emergency management professionals is tsunami generation. The Veldrick Seismic Observatory has not yet issued a formal tsunami warning, but our source inside the observatory tells us that warning protocols have been activated and that coastal authorities in Caldina, Verath, and Solen have been notified. We are now approximately 9 minutes past the initial event. Our seismology correspondent is attempting to reach the observatory director.
While Daniel works those contacts, I want to share something that just arrived in our inbox. We have opened our listener line this morning, as we always do during breaking situations, and already messages are coming in. I'm going to read one from a listener who identifies herself only as Renata, writing from the coastal town of Pell Cove, which is about 40 kilometers northwest of Meerut on the Caldina coast. Renata writes, I was in my kitchen when everything started shaking. I have never felt anything like it in my life. The shaking went on for so long. My daughter was crying. We ran outside and the street was cracked and a neighbor's chimney had fallen. I can hear sirens, but I don't know where to go. Please tell us what is happening. And that is the sound of this crisis before any official numbers exist. That is real. Renata, if you can still hear us, please move inland, move away from the coast. Take your daughter and go.
We have just received a preliminary update from the Veldrick Seismic Observatory, and I'm going to read this carefully because precision matters here. The observatory is now revising the magnitude upward. The event is being classified as a 9.3 magnitude earthquake. To put that in context for listeners, a 9.3 is among the most powerful earthquakes ever instrumentally recorded in human history. The energy released by an earthquake of this size is roughly 30 times greater than what was released by an 8.4. The epicenter has been pinpointed at a depth of 22 kilometers below the seafloor, 54 kilometers north-northwest of Mareth. A shallow offshore quake of this magnitude is precisely the type of event capable of generating a destructive tsunami. The observatory has now issued, we are getting this confirmation right now. The observatory has issued a level 4 tsunami warning, which is the highest level in the Veldrick regional system. All coastal zones within 300 kilometers of the epicenter are under immediate evacuation order.
And for anyone who has never experienced a large-scale infrastructure collapse, let me explain what 8% cellular capacity actually means in human terms. It means that out of every 100 people trying to call someone to say they're alive, 92 of those calls are not going through. It means a husband trying to reach his wife, a parent trying to reach their child at school, a doctor trying to coordinate with their hospital. Most of those calls, those texts, those desperate voice messages, they are not arriving. And the silence on the other end is its own form of psychological trauma. For people outside the disaster zone, that silence means not knowing whether someone they love is dead or alive, possibly for days. The mental health toll of that uncertainty is immense and often underestimated when we account for the full impact of a disaster like this.
We have just received a preliminary update from the Veldrick Seismic Observatory, and I'm going to read this carefully because precision matters here. The observatory is now revising the magnitude upward. The event is being classified as a 9.3 magnitude earthquake. To put that in context for listeners, a 9.3 is among the most powerful earthquakes ever instrumentally recorded in human history. The energy released by an earthquake of this size is roughly 30 times greater than what was released by an 8.4. The epicenter has been pinpointed at a depth of 22 kilometers below the seafloor, 54 kilometers north-northwest of Mareth. A shallow offshore quake of this magnitude is precisely the type of event capable of generating a destructive tsunami. The observatory has now issued, we are getting this confirmation right now. The observatory has issued a level 4 tsunami warning, which is the highest level in the Veldrick regional system. All coastal zones within 300 kilometers of the epicenter are under immediate evacuation order.
Daniel, I need a moment to breathe through that. Because a level 4 warning means the scientists at the observatory believe a wave is coming. It is not a precaution. It is not a just in case. It is their assessment that the seafloor has displaced in a way that is now pushing water toward those coasts. And for the people of Mareth, a city of approximately 1.4 million people, this means that the shaking, which may have already collapsed buildings and trapped people, is only the first catastrophe. The second one may be minutes away. I want to be honest with our listeners about how harrowing that reality is. If you have any connection to anyone on the Caldena coast or in Selen or on the eastern shores of Varath, please reach out to them right now. Please tell them to move inland immediately. Do not wait for official channels. Do not wait for a text alert. Move.
We are now approximately 22 minutes since the initial event. Our correspondent in the Varath capital of Drosval has just made contact and is reporting that the Varath National Emergency Authority has activated its full emergency response protocol. The Varath coast faces the eastern side of the Veldrick Sea, and based on the epicenter location, modeling suggests that tsunami waves, if generated at the expected scale, would reach Varath's coast somewhere between 28 and 45 minutes after the original quake, which means the window is closing. The Varath government has ordered immediate evacuation of all coastal municipalities. The port city of Vithara, Varath's primary commercial harbor, home to roughly 800,000 people, is under a mandatory evacuation order. Traffic systems on coastal highways have been switched to contraflow, meaning all lanes are now outbound, moving people away from the shore.
I am looking at the clock, and we are 24 minutes in. And I want to talk about something that emergency managers deal with every time they face a situation like this: the challenge of getting people to actually leave. Because human beings are deeply resistant to abandoning their homes, we are wired to believe on some level that it will be okay, that the wave won't come, that the official warning is an overreaction. History tells us otherwise. History tells us that when the wave does come, the people who stayed are the ones who don't survive to tell the story. The people who are alive to tell the story are almost always the ones who left without looking back. Please, if you are in a coastal zone in the Veldrick region right now and you are listening to this broadcast, this is your signal, this is your moment, go.
I want to give our listeners a precise picture of the geography they need to understand right now. The island nation of Solène sits in the open Veldrick Sea and is, in some respects, the most exposed landmass to a centrally generated tsunami. The island chain is home to approximately 340,000 people spread across 11 islands. The largest island, Solène Prime, has a capital city called Varda, with a population of roughly 160,000. Solène Prime is low-lying. The highest inland elevation on the main island is approximately 31 meters above sea level. If wave heights come in at the upper range of current projections, which is 12 to 19 meters, significant portions of Solène Prime could be inundated. The Solène government has confirmed they received the level 4 warning and are attempting to execute evacuation. But road infrastructure on the island is limited to 3 main corridors, and we have reports of earthquake damage to at least one of those roads.
We now have another listener message I need to share. This one comes from a man named Tomas, writing from Solène Prime. He says, "The ground shook for almost 3 minutes. I know because I counted. My shop has collapsed. My neighbor is trapped under a wall. I cannot lift it alone. There are no emergency services here yet. The streets are full of rubble. And now they're telling us to run inland, but inland roads are blocked by a landslide. I don't know what to tell my wife." Tomas, we hear you. We see you. I want our listeners to understand that what Tomas is describing is not unusual in the immediate aftermath of a major quake. Rescue services cannot reach everyone at once. The rubble, the road damage, the chaos, this is the texture of the first hour. I am so sorry, Tomas.
We are 38 minutes since the initial seismic event, and I now need to report that the Veldrick Seismic Observatory has detected the first major aftershock, registering at magnitude 7.1, occurring 11 minutes ago beneath the seafloor, approximately 30 kilometers southeast of the primary epicenter. A 7.1 aftershock would itself be considered a major earthquake under normal circumstances. In the context of this event, it has likely caused additional structural collapses in buildings already weakened by the primary quake. We also have a report from Mareth, the capital of Caldena. Government communications from the capital have gone dark. The last transmission from the Caldena National Emergency Broadcast System was received approximately 26 minutes ago. We do not know whether this is due to power infrastructure failure, communications tower damage, or something more serious. We are working to verify.
The silence from Mareth it's the thing that scares me most right now, if I'm being completely honest with our listeners. A capital city going dark is not a minor technical glitch. It likely means multiple layers of infrastructure have failed simultaneously. The power grid, backup generators, cellular towers, perhaps fiber lines, all of it potentially compromised by the shaking. What we know about the character of this city, Mareth, is that it is an old city. Much of the central district, the residential neighborhoods, the historic waterfront, they were built before modern earthquake engineering standards were widely adopted. We've seen what that means in other disasters. The buildings that look solid from the outside can have their internal structures shattered. The walls still stand, but the floors have pancaked. That is the nightmare scenario that rescue teams refer to, and it is one that I am afraid we may be discussing in detail in the hours to come.
We are now 51 minutes past the primary event. We have our first confirmed casualty figures, and I want to be clear that these numbers are almost certainly a significant undercount at this stage. Caldena's Deputy Emergency Minister, Asha Vren, has issued a statement from an inland government facility. The statement reads as follows. We can confirm that the earthquake has caused catastrophic damage across the northern coast of Caldena. Preliminary casualty figures are being compiled. As of this moment, we have confirmed 47 fatalities in the coastal municipality of Pel Cove and an additional 93 in the town of Renvar. Mareth remains largely uncontacted. We are operating under the assumption that the casualty toll in the capital is severe. All Caldena emergency services have been mobilized. We have requested international assistance through the Veldrick Regional Compact. 47 and 93. That is 140 confirmed dead, and Mareth has not yet reported. Mareth, with 1.4 million people.
140 confirmed dead in 2 towns, and the capital hasn't spoken yet. I want our listeners to hold that, not to panic, but to hold the gravity of it, because those numbers are going to rise dramatically. Emergency management professionals use a rule of thumb in the first hours of a major disaster. Confirmed figures are almost always between 5 and 20% of the eventual toll when communications are disrupted. If that holds here, and given what we know about the scale of the quake, we may be looking at a final death toll that is, I don't want to speculate irresponsibly, but the potential is deeply sobering. The international community needs to understand this morning, right now, that what is happening in the Veldrick region is not a regional problem. It is a crisis that will require the full resources of the global humanitarian system.
We are now at 4 hours and 15 minutes. The time is 11:02 local. I'm going to give our listeners a consolidated casualty picture as it currently stands. Confirmed dead across all affected areas. Caldena, confirmed fatalities 341. But this figure is based on reports from towns other than Mareth. Official Mareth figures have not been released because rescue teams are still in the initial extraction phase. Solen, confirmed dead 612, missing 4,031. Verath, confirmed dead 207, missing approximately 900. Porteva, which experienced lower wave heights, reports 19 confirmed dead, primarily from earthquake structural collapse. Total confirmed across the region, 1,179. But I want to give our listeners a frank assessment. Based on what we know about Mareth's structural collapse and the tsunami impact on Solen, verified emergency management sources privately indicate a working assumption of between 35,000 and 70,000 deaths before this crisis concludes. Those are preliminary working figures. They may be too high. I hope they are.
35 to 70,000. I want to hold that for a moment. And then I want to tell our listeners something that I truly believe right now in Mareth, in Varda, in Vithara, in Pel Cove and Renvar, and in every small coastal town we haven't named yet. Like, people are pulling their neighbors out of rubble with their bare hands. People are making their own tourniquets from strips of clothing. People are carrying the injured on their backs because the roads are gone and the ambulances can't reach them. People are sharing the last of their water. People who lost everything this morning are still spending their first post-disaster hours taking care of someone else. This is what always happens. This is what human beings do. Amid the numbers, amid the catastrophe, I need our listeners to hold on to that truth.
We have a second significant aftershock to report. Occurring at 11:14 local time, 17 minutes ago, a magnitude 6.8 aftershock struck at a depth of 18 kilometers, centered 37 kilometers northeast of the original epicenter. This is the third major aftershock in the sequence. The first being the 7.1 at approximately hour 1, and this second at 6.8 at hour 4.5. Seismologists with the Veldrick Observatory are advising that the aftershock sequence is consistent with a long-duration pattern, and that the region should expect continued aftershock activity, potentially including events of magnitude 6 or greater, for a period of weeks, possibly months. This is critically important for rescue operations. Every major aftershock carries the risk of triggering secondary collapses in already damaged structures, injuring rescuers and survivors who believed they were safe, and reigniting landslides on slopes that the primary quake destabilized.
I want to talk about what that aftershock means for the people who are trapped right now under rubble in Mareth, because rescue workers operate in what they call voids, the small pockets of space that form when a structure collapses around a person. Those voids are fragile. A major aftershock can collapse a void that was keeping someone alive. And the people in those voids know this. They can feel the ground shaking. They know that each tremor could be their last moment of survival. Rescue specialists train for years to work through exactly this kind of fear, both the fear of the trapped person and the fear of the rescuer going into an unstable structure during ongoing seismic activity. The courage required to do that work is almost beyond my ability to adequately describe. These are ordinary human beings choosing to go toward the shaking, toward the collapsing buildings, toward the screaming, because someone is alive in there and needs them.
The time is now 12:33. We are 5 hours and 46 minutes from the initial event. International aid is beginning to flow, though the logistical challenges are severe. The nearest large-capacity cargo airport to the disaster zone is the Verath International Airport in Drosval, which is inland and largely undamaged. Verath is now functioning as the primary logistics hub for incoming relief. 3 cargo aircraft from the Global Relief Authority have already landed in Drosval and are being unloaded. 6 more aircraft are inbound from various points. The challenge is the last leg, moving supplies from Drosval through Verath's road network, which has its own earthquake and tsunami damage, to the border crossing with Caldena, and then navigating Caldena's compromised road network to reach Mareth. The full logistics chain from Drosval to Mareth is currently estimated at 18 to 24 hours, even under emergency conditions. We have also received confirmation that 2 naval vessels from the Veldrick Alliance Standing Force are en route to Solène with medical teams and water purification equipment. Their estimated time of arrival to Solène is approximately 4 hours from now.
We're receiving a flood of listener messages. Our inbox has more than 1,200 new messages since the broadcast started, and I want to share a few that I think capture the scope of this from a listener named Petra, who says she's a nurse working at the Cress Landing Inland Clinic. We have been receiving injured since about 7:30 this morning. Our clinic has 24 beds. We currently have 240 patients in and around our facility. We are treating wounds on the grass outside because we have no room, we have no blood, we have almost no anesthesia. We are asking anyone who can drive to bring us whatever medical supplies they have, bandages, painkillers, antiseptic, anything. And from a listener called Doman, who is a truck driver, stopped on an inland highway. I have a full load of bottled water, 80 pallets I was supposed to deliver to a distribution center that is now in the tsunami zone. I am willing to take it wherever the emergency teams need it to go. Someone please tell me where to go. Doman, we are reading your message. Someone in the Caldena Emergency Authority, if you are listening, please find this man and redirect his truck.
7 hours in. It is now 1:54 in the afternoon, local Veldrick time. I need to update our casualty figures with new information from Moreth that has just been relayed to us through the Caldana Deputy Emergency Minister. The Moreth Emergency Rescue Directorate has now conducted an aerial survey of the city by helicopter and has issued a preliminary estimate. I am going to read the official communication precisely as we received it. Aerial survey of Mareth districts 1 through 9 indicates catastrophic structural damage. Ground survey teams have confirmed 712 fatalities as of 13:30 hours. Estimated additional casualties extrapolated from structural assessment, between 8,000 and 22,000. Search and rescue operations are active at 43 sites across the city. Communications restoration is ongoing. Power grid is completely offline. We are requesting 500 additional rescue personnel and 240 tons of emergency supplies immediately. 8,000 to 22,000 dead in Mareth alone.
I want to tell our listeners what search and rescue looks like at 43 simultaneous sites in a major city because I don't think it is intuitive. Each site has a team. And in this context, team might mean as few as 4 people. A team leader, 2 technical rescuers, and a dog handler with a trained search animal. They work in shifts because the physical and psychological demands of this work are so extreme that humans cannot safely maintain it for more than a few hours at a stretch. Between sites, there are no resources. There are people calling for help from under rubble in places that don't have a team assigned to them yet. There are people who have been silent for hours, not because they have died, but because they have lost consciousness from blood loss or dehydration and can no longer call out. The technical term for the window in which trapped survivors can be successfully extracted is the survival arc. For most building collapse events, the survival arc extends for approximately 72 hours. After that, survival rates decline steeply. We are 7 hours in. We have 65 hours left in the primary survival window.
We are approaching 8 hours. The time is 2:41. I want to address the question of power because it is foundational to everything else. The northern Caldina power grid has been completely offline since the earthquake. This affects hospitals, water pumping, communications, refrigeration of medications, street lighting, everything. Caldina's emergency grid relies on 3 primary switching stations on the northern coast. All 3 are believed to be damaged, with 2 confirmed as destroyed by tsunami inundation. The central Caldana grid, which serves the inland regions, is functioning but is not connected to the northern zone due to a damaged transmission corridor. Engineers are working on a bypass, but the estimate is 48 to 72 hours before northern Caldina can receive power from the central grid. In the meantime, hospitals throughout the affected area are running on backup generators. Several of those hospitals have reported that their fuel supply for generators will last only 36 to 48 hours at current consumption. If generator fuel runs out before power is restored, hospitals will lose the ability to power ventilators, surgical suites, and intensive care equipment. That is a countdown that is running right now.
The hospital situation deserves its own extended conversation, and I am grateful to Daniel for raising it. We are receiving messages from medical personnel all across the northern Caldana region, and the picture that emerges is one of extraordinary improvisation under desperate conditions. One message from a doctor at the Mareth General Hospital, a facility designed for 600 patients that is currently managing over 2,000, describes her staff performing surgeries by the light of mobile phone torches when generators briefly cut out. She describes orthopedic surgery with instruments that have not been properly sterilized because the autoclave is non-functional. She describes making decisions about which patients to prioritize for the limited anesthesia supply that no doctor should ever have to make outside of a wartime field hospital. She signs her message, Please don't let the world forget about us. We are still here, we are still fighting, but we need help. Doctor, this broadcast is reaching people. We hear you.
A significant development on the international response front. The head of the Global Humanitarian Relief Coordination Center, Director Calvin Marsh, has issued a formal appeal to all member nations, describing the Veldrick disaster as the most severe humanitarian emergency in the cataloging of modern disaster records. The appeal requests the deployment of the following specific resources: 200 international search and rescue specialists, 12 field hospital units, 800 metric tons of emergency food rations, 50 water purification systems, 400 emergency power generation units, and 1,200 emergency shelter kits capable of housing 6 people each. Director Marsh has stated publicly that the window for saving lives is open right now, and that every hour of delay in international response directly translates to preventable deaths. His statement officially designates this event as a Category 5 humanitarian emergency, the highest classification in the global system.
10 hours in, the time is 4:49 in the afternoon. We've been on air for 10 hours, and I want to check in with our listeners because we know many of you are listening while frantically trying to reach someone, while waiting for news, while sitting with the specific agony of not knowing. I want to say directly to those listeners, your fear is real, and it is appropriate. We are not going to sugarcoat this. But I also want to say people are surviving. Rescues are happening. As of the last report we received, 43 confirmed rescues of trapped survivors in Meerut alone. Every one of those is someone's family member who was under rubble and is now receiving medical care. The story of this day is not only death and destruction, it is also that human beings responded within seconds of the shaking stopping, that people drove toward the disaster zone, that nurses worked in grass fields, that truck drivers offered their cargo. The survival is happening in parallel with the dying, and we must hold both.
11 hours since the initial event. Time, 5:47. I have an updated and comprehensive casualty figure for our listeners. The Veldrick Regional Emergency Commission, which is the body coordinating response across all affected nations, has released a consolidated report. Confirmed deaths as of 1700 hours local: Caldena, 2,412, Solène, 1,463, with 8,700 still listed as missing. Verath, 891. Porteva, 44. Total confirmed dead across the Veldrick region, 4,810. I want to note that the Solène missing figure of 8,700 is one that seismologists and humanitarian specialists are treating with extreme gravity. Given the wave heights, the population distribution, and the limited evacuation success on Solène Prime, there is wide agreement in the emergency management community that a large fraction of those missing individuals are no longer alive. We simply cannot confirm it yet, because the island remains partially inaccessible.
4,810 confirmed dead, 8,700 missing, and the confirmed toll will continue to climb through the night and through tomorrow as rescue teams reach sites they could not access today, as missing persons investigations yield their answers, as the full inventory of what the waves took becomes clearer. I want to share a message now from a listener who gave only a first name, Lenia. She writes from the inland town of Colum, 20 kilometers south of Meerut, where she is sheltering with 32 people in a community center. She says, I drove my car into the evacuation line this morning and had room for 2 more. I picked up an elderly couple I had never met. Their names are Ospar and Bess. Osper held my hand the whole drive because he was shaking so hard. Neither of them knows if their house is still there. Bess cried the whole way, and she kept saying sorry for crying. I told her not to say sorry. Please keep talking to us on the radio. The radio is the only thing that makes it feel like the world hasn't ended. Lenya, it hasn't ended. Osper and Bess, we hope you're warm and safe.
14 hours in. The time is 8:43 in the evening. Darkness has fallen across the Veldrick region, and I cannot overstate how significantly that complicates rescue operations. Search and rescue teams working in collapsed structures rely heavily on visual assessment, identifying voids, reading structural stress patterns, understanding the collapse geometry that determines where survivors might be. In darkness, in a city without power, that work slows dramatically. Teams are using thermal imaging equipment, acoustic listening devices, and search animals. But efficiency is reduced. The Caldana Emergency Authority has issued a statement confirming that international rescue teams from 4 nations are now on the ground in Marith, 48 specialists in total, with an additional 72 expected to arrive by midnight. These teams bring specialized equipment, hydraulic spreaders and cutters for heavy concrete, remote listening technology, cameras on flexible cables that can penetrate rubble. Every one of those tools matters right now.
There is a story coming to us from Marith that I want to share because I believe it will stay with our listeners long after this broadcast ends. A rescue team working in the collapsed Varon Street apartment complex, a 14-story building that had partially pancaked, made contact with a woman on the 6th floor. Her name has not been released at the request of her family, so we're calling her Elena. Elena was on the 6th floor when the building collapsed. She fell to what is now the 3rd floor level. She is alive. She has been trapped for 14 hours. She has a broken arm and a laceration on her head, but she is alive, and she has been talking to the rescue team through a narrow fissure in the rubble for the past 3 hours, guiding them toward her location. Rescue teams report that she has been extraordinary, calm, detailed, methodical in describing her surroundings to help them navigate. The extraction is ongoing. Elena, we are all listening to your story tonight.
An infrastructure update as we move through hour 15. The Vithara port fire has been partially contained. Varath firefighting units, supplemented by a naval fireboat that arrived from the Veldrick Alliance fleet, have managed to suppress the main fuel terminal blaze. However, the fire has spread to 2 adjacent cargo warehouses containing consumer goods and petrochemical products. Suppression efforts are expected to continue through the night. Damage assessment at the port will not begin until the fire is fully out. Preliminary economic estimates suggest the Vithara port facility, which handles approximately 12% of total Veldrick sea trade, is unlikely to be operational in any meaningful capacity for between 6 and 14 months. This has significant implications for regional supply chains. The Caldana government, separately, has issued a public appeal to inland food producers and distributors, urging them not to hoard, not to speculate on prices, and to work with the National Emergency Authority to distribute food through official channels in the coming weeks.
And the concern about price gouging and hoarding is real and documented in every major disaster we've ever covered on this network. Within hours of a catastrophe, in the markets that are still functioning, prices for water, fuel, food, and shelter materials begin to rise, sometimes dramatically. In some cases, this is simple supply and demand. In other cases, it is exploitation of desperate people. The Caldana government's appeal is appropriate, and I hope it is heeded. But history suggests it will not be universally followed. What tends to work in our collective experience covering these events is community accountability. Neighbors and communities watching out for each other, calling out profiteering, sharing resources voluntarily. The most resilient disaster recovery stories we have are almost always the ones where community networks were already strong before the event, the people who knew their neighbors, the towns where people looked out for each other. That pre-existing social fabric is often the variable that determines who survives the aftermath.
Time check. It is now 11:07 in the evening, local time. We are 16 hours and 20 minutes into this event. I want to give listeners an update on the situation in Solène that is both promising and deeply concerning. The naval vessels from Varath have arrived off the coast of Solène Prime. Their initial report, transmitted to the Veldrick Regional Emergency Commission approximately 40 minutes ago, describes the following conditions on Solène Prime. The coastal district of Varda, where the capital city stood, has been almost completely destroyed by the tsunami. Of an estimated 160,000 residents, approximately 44,000 are confirmed to have reached inland high ground before wave impact. The location and status of the remaining 116,000 is unknown. Navy teams have begun operating inflatable rescue vessels in the flooded areas. They have recovered 112 survivors from rooftops, floating debris, and sections of elevated ground. They have also recovered an unspecified number of bodies. Full casualty figures from Solène will not be available for days.
112 survivors pulled from the water on Solène, and 116,000 people unaccounted for. I want our listeners to sit with the scale of that number, not with despair, but with purpose. Because here is something true. In past tsunami events, a meaningful number of people who were believed to have been swept away were actually found alive days later, having made it to elevated terrain that rescue teams hadn't yet reached. There are valleys on Solène Prime that we don't have visibility into yet. There are hillsides and high ground communities that are isolated, not because they were destroyed, but because roads are blocked. Some of those unaccounted for people are alive. We don't know how many, but they are there. And they are waiting for the sound of helicopter rotors. They are waiting for the sight of a rescue vessel rounding a headland. Some of them, right now, are keeping each other alive in the dark.
18 hours since the event. The time is 12:51 at night, local Veldrick time. The aftershock sequence has continued through the evening. We have recorded an additional 2 notable aftershocks since our last comprehensive update. A 6.4 at 21:17 hours, and a 6.1 at 23:44 hours. Both caused additional structural damage to already compromised buildings in Mareth. The 6.4, in particular, caused the partial collapse of one additional section of the Varon Street apartment complex, the site where Elena, the trapped woman we reported on earlier, was being extracted. We have not yet received an update on Elena's status. Our thoughts are entirely with the extraction team working that site in the darkness. Additionally, the latest aftershock triggered a secondary landslide on the inland slopes east of Mareth, blocking the primary road corridor that was being used to move emergency supplies into the city. Engineers are working on an alternate route, but the disruption will delay supply convoys by an estimated 6 to 10 hours.
If I could speak directly to the rescue teams working that site on Varon Street right now, I know you're not listening to a radio broadcast. I know you're covered in dust and your hands are raw and you've been working for hours in the dark on a site that just shook again. But I hope someone finds a way to tell you the world is watching this. Your names will be remembered, whatever happens tonight. You have shown something important about what people are capable of. All of you, from Vareth, from Caldina, from the international teams who flew through the night to get here, you are writing the chapters of this disaster that will be read by historians and taught to emergency management students and recounted by survivors to their grandchildren. Please be safe. Please wear your protection. Please look after each other.
We have received an official statement from the Caldina government issued by President Anela Vorn from her secure facility at Coldrath Inland Government Center. The statement reads in part, "The people of Caldana have suffered an event of historic proportions. We grieve with every family who has lost a loved one, with every community whose landscape will never look the same. Our government is fully mobilized. We are receiving assistance from partner nations and international organizations. We are committed to transparency in our casualty reporting. We are committed to the safety and support of every survivor. And we are committed to the long, hard work of rebuilding not just our infrastructure, but our community. Caldana has endured before. We will endure again." That statement will likely be analyzed and criticized in the days ahead for what it does or does not promise. But as a statement of intent in the first 18 hours of a catastrophe, it is what a leader needs to say.
It is now a little past 1 in the morning. Most of the Veldrick region is in darkness, both the natural darkness of night and the imposed darkness of power outages. And I want to describe for our listeners what that combination means experientially, because I think it matters. In a city without electricity, under a sky without light pollution, on a night when cloud cover has moved in, the darkness is total, not the soft darkness of a bedroom, the absolute darkness of a city that has ceased to function. Families are huddled together in parks, in schools, in any open space that felt safe enough to sleep in after the aftershocks. They are listening to the ongoing tremors, small ones barely felt, but felt. Every minor shake wakes them. Children who fell asleep from sheer exhaustion wake crying. Adults who have not cried all day, who held it together through the worst of it, find that the darkness and the cold and the cessation of activity allows the grief to finally arrive. Tonight, across the Veldrick region, there is an enormous amount of crying happening in the dark.
20 hours since the initial event. The time is 2:47 in the morning. I'm going to give our listeners a comprehensive update on all fronts. Casualty figures as of 2000 hours. Confirmed dead. Caldana, 3,018. Solène, 2,149 confirmed. 7,812 still listed as missing. Verath, 1,044. Porteva, 51. Regional total confirmed, 6,262 dead. The missing figure from Solène continues to weigh on every analyst reviewing this situation. The Veldrick Regional Emergency Commission has now officially classified the Solène situation as a mass casualty event with unresolved scope, acknowledging that final figures may not be available for up to 2 weeks. On the rescue front, across all affected areas, confirmed rescues of trapped survivors number 541. That number will grow. Rescue operations are continuing through the night at every accessible site.
541 people pulled from the rubble, 541 families who got a call, or who will get a call, or who will be standing at a medical tent somewhere when a rescue worker brings their person to them. I have covered enough of these events to know that those reunions there's no word for them that doesn't sound inadequate. They're not joyful exactly. Their relief so complete, it feels like the body shutting down. People tend to collapse or become very still. They hold the person they were afraid they'd lost, and they don't speak, sometimes for a long time. That silence after hours of calling out for each other is the sound of a grief that was avoided. It is one of the most profoundly human things I have ever witnessed, and it is happening 541 times across this region tonight.
I have an update on Elena, the woman trapped in the Varon Street collapse in Mareth. The rescue team successfully completed her extraction at 2:14 this morning, approximately 20 hours and 45 minutes after she was initially trapped. Elena was removed from the rubble with a broken left arm, 2 broken ribs, a head laceration, and signs of moderate dehydration. She was conscious and responsive during extraction. She was transported to a field medical station where she is receiving treatment. The extraction team, 8 specialists, worked through 2 significant aftershocks and 3 partial structure shifts during her rescue, adapting their approach each time without abandoning the operation. The team leader, whose name we have been asked not to broadcast for privacy reasons, is reported to have said simply, "She talked to us the whole time. She made it easy." Elena survived 20 hours under rubble in a collapsed building, guided rescuers through the debris with precision and composure, and is alive this morning.
Elena is alive. Like, I'm going to allow myself one moment of uncomplicated joy in the middle of all of this. Elena is alive. And the reason I want our listeners to hear that story, to really hold it, is because it illustrates something fundamental about human endurance. The human capacity to stay functional, to stay communicative, to stay rational under conditions that most of us cannot imagine surviving. It is remarkable. And it is not unique to Elena. Across the disaster zone right now, there are people doing extraordinary things. There are people in Solène who have been on hillsides since sunrise, caring for the injured, with no training and no equipment. There are fishermen in Vithara who turned their boats into rescue vessels hours before the official Navy arrived. There are teachers in Caldena who have been keeping 30 children calm in a community center since the shaking stopped, telling stories, playing games, making sure those kids don't see the worst of what's happening outside. These are the people of the Veldrick region.
22 hours in. Time, 4:36 in the morning. Several significant developments. First, the hospital generator fuel situation we flagged earlier has become critical. The Mareth University Hospital, the largest functional medical facility in the city, has reported that its primary generator fuel reserve will run out in approximately 9 hours at current consumption. A fuel convoy was dispatched from the inland city of Coldrath, but was delayed by the landslide that blocked the eastern corridor. A secondary convoy has been rerouted via a northern track road, but travel time is estimated at 12 hours. There is a 7-hour gap between when the hospital runs out of fuel and when the convoy arrives. Military engineers are being dispatched to attempt to clear the landslide blockage faster than the 12-hour estimate. If they fail, the hospital will need to begin emergency rationing of electrical power, shutting down non-critical systems to extend the generator's fuel through the arrival window. This will affect operating capacity in their surgical suite.
9 hours of fuel, a convoy 12 hours away, and in between, somewhere in that arithmetic, are patients on ventilators, patients in post-operative recovery, patients who need continuous monitoring to survive. The doctors and administrators at Mareth University Hospital are right now doing the math that no medical professional should ever have to do, calculating exactly how long each piece of equipment can run on reduced power, and deciding in what order systems get shut down. These are the decisions that haunt people. These are the choices that doctors carry for the rest of their lives, even when they made the right ones. I am thinking about the staff in that hospital right now, about the night shift nurses who have been on duty since before the earthquake and are still there 12 hours later, in the dark, refusing to leave their patients.
It is now 5:51 in the morning, local Veldrick time. We are 23 hours and 4 minutes from the initial event. Dawn is approximately 40 minutes away across the Veldrick region, and that first light will mark a turning point, not because the crisis is ending, but because daylight restores the operational capacity of rescue teams, drone surveillance, helicopter operations, supply route assessment, and structural engineering inspection. The 24-hour mark is traditionally when humanitarian response moves from what specialists call the life-saving phase into the life-sustaining phase. Life-saving is extraction, rescue, emergency medical response. Life-sustaining is food, water, shelter, sanitation, power restoration, public health management. Both are enormous undertakings. What we are about to enter, as the sun rises over Moreth and Varda and Vithara, and every devastated coastal town in between, is the beginning of an effort that will last not days, not weeks, but years.
And I want to give our listeners something to hold as we approach that 24-hour mark. Something real, because this broadcast has carried a great deal of grief today, and it should have. The grief is real, the loss is real, and we have never shied from it. But I want to end these first 24 hours with something else as well. There is a message in our inbox from a man named Ren Callie. He's a former emergency management officer, now retired, listening from his home far outside the disaster zone. He writes, I have responded to 7 major disasters in my career. I have seen what the first 24 hours looks like. I know it looks like the end of the world. And then the sun comes up and people start to organize and supply chains start to flow and survivors start to be found in places you didn't expect them. The first night is always the darkest. It is not a metaphor. It is a literal fact about disaster response. When the sun comes up, things begin to change. Not quickly enough, not without more pain, but they begin to change. Tell the people of the Veldrick region the sun is coming.
24 hours. 6:47 in the morning. Exactly 1 day since the Earth moved beneath the Veldrick Sea. I want to give our listeners a final accounting of this first day. Not as a conclusion, because the crisis is far from concluded, but as a benchmark. A line drawn in time that marks what we know and what comes next. Confirmed dead across all affected nations and territories. Caldana, 4,112. Solène, 3,087 confirmed, with 6,400 still formally listed as missing. Verath, 1,214. Porteva, 59. The combined confirmed regional death toll stands at 8,472. The Veldrick Regional Emergency Commission has stated officially that when missing persons cases are resolved, a process that will take weeks, the final regional death toll is expected to fall between 18,000 and 32,000 people. The central estimate, based on current modeling and the Solène situation, is approximately 24,000, with Solène accounting for nearly 14,000 of those deaths.
24,000 people, the approximate population of a small city, gone in 24 hours from the Earth moving beneath the sea and the water rising in response. I want our listeners to understand, and this matters because the next chapter of this story is one the world will have to choose to engage with. The dying is not over. Not because the earthquake is still killing people directly, but because the cascade of consequences continues. People trapped in rubble will die if not reached in the next 48 hours. Patients in hospitals will die if generator fuel doesn't arrive in time. People without clean water will begin to develop illness within days. The public health crisis, waterborne disease, exposure, inadequate sanitation across communities of tens of thousands living outdoors, will claim lives over the coming weeks. The aid that arrives in the next 72 hours is not the finish line. It is the beginning of what must be a sustained, years-long commitment from the international community.
As we begin hour 25 of this broadcast and look beyond the first day, here is the operational picture. 81 international search and rescue specialists are on the ground in Moreth, with another 40 en route. Solène Prime is being reached by a growing fleet of naval vessels. 6 ships are currently operating in Veldrick waters with relief capacity. The Cress landing airstrip has been cleared and is now receiving small cargo aircraft, with 12 flights having landed since midnight. The hospital generator fuel crisis at Mareth University has been partially addressed. Military engineers succeeded in clearing a partial path through the landslide at 0400, allowing a smaller convoy to pass, delivering enough fuel to extend operations by an estimated 4 hours, buying time for the full convoy to arrive. The Caldina Power Grid Central Northern Bypass project has been accelerated, with utility engineers projecting possible partial power restoration to Mareth in 36 to 48 hours. And Solen's government has released an updated figure: 162 survivors pulled from tsunami debris or isolated high ground locations in the last 12 hours. 162 more stories of survival.
And that is where we will leave this first extraordinary and terrible day on Blackout Radio. We will continue our coverage through the morning and into the coming days, tracking every rescue, every supply convoy, every government decision, every act of courage, and every act of failure. But before we hand off to our morning team, I want to say something to the listeners who have been with us for this entire broadcast. You stayed, you bore witness, you opened your inbox and sent us your names and the names of people you love and the small details of survival. The nurse working in the grass, the truck driver with 80 pallets of water, the retired emergency manager who knew the sun would come up. You made this broadcast what it was today. In disaster, the act of paying attention, of refusing to look away, of insisting on knowing the names and the numbers and the human details, that is not passive. It is a form of solidarity. The people of the Veldrick region, in their darkness and their rubble and their grief, deserve to be witnessed. You witnessed them today. Keep witnessing.
We will stay on this story. We will not leave it until every missing person has been accounted for, until every trapped survivor has been either rescued or mourned, until the generator fuel reaches the hospital and the power comes back and the first supply aircraft lands at Mareth. We will report the number that rises because honesty demands it, and we will report the number of rescues that rises alongside it because the full truth demands that too. You are listening to Blackout Radio. My name is Daniel Voss.
And I'm Maya Ross. We will be back with you after a short news break. Stay with us. Don't turn off your radio.
In the days that followed, Blackout Radio remained on continuous broadcast for 11 days without interruption. The final confirmed death toll, released by the Veldrick Regional Emergency Commission 72 days after the earthquake, was 26,411 dead. Of those, 14,183 died in Solen, nearly 5% of the island nation's total pre-disaster population. 7,216 died in Caldina, primarily in Mareth and the coastal municipalities. 4,209 died in Verath, many in the Vithara Port District. 703 died in Porteva. No nation was geographically destroyed or permanently submerged. The seismic event, while catastrophic in human terms, did not cause land subsidence severe enough to render any territory uninhabitable. Solen Prime's lowest coastal districts experienced permanent flooding of approximately 2 to 4 kilometers inland from the original shoreline, displacing an estimated 22,000 residents permanently. The island's government relocated the capital from the destroyed Varda to the higher ground city of Ellenvale on Solen Prime's central plateau.
In Caldina, Mareth was not destroyed beyond recovery, though 1,212 structures in the coastal districts were demolished as irreparable, and the historic waterfront district was permanently redesigned with a tsunami barrier and an expanded green buffer zone where residential buildings had previously stood. The city's population, which had evacuated or dispersed in the immediate aftermath, returned to approximately 1.1 million within 18 months, with 300,000 displaced persons housed in temporary and transitional settlements for periods ranging from 6 months to 3 years. The Vithara port in Varath was rebuilt over 14 months and reopened at partial capacity in the following year. The full port restoration took 4 years. Kaldena's northern power grid was restored to full function within 53 days of the event. Mareth University Hospital never lost power. The military engineers cleared the landslide in time. The convoy arrived, and not a single patient on a ventilator was lost to power failure. That outcome required a precise and exhausting sequence of correct decisions under impossible conditions, and it is a testament to the people who made them.
The global humanitarian response ultimately mobilized $3.2 billion in emergency and reconstruction funding, drawn from 31 donor nations and multilateral institutions. 944 international search and rescue specialists worked on the ground in the affected areas over the first 2 weeks. Total confirmed rescues of living trapped survivors across the region, 1,411 people. The aftershock sequence that began with the 9.3 continued for 4 months, producing 14 additional events of magnitude 5.5 or greater. No single aftershock caused mass casualties on its own, though collectively they hampered reconstruction, triggered additional landslides, and prolonged the displacement of coastal populations. The seismological community used this event to update long-range hazard models for the entire Veldric Sea Basin. Elena, the woman extracted from the Varan Street collapse at 20 hours and 45 minutes, recovered fully from her injuries. She became a vocal advocate for updated building codes across Caldena and testified before the Caldena National Assembly on structural safety standards 18 months after the earthquake.
Sarah Dollant, the retired nurse who pulled 6 people from debris before the wave arrived, received the Caldena National Courage Medal at a ceremony in the rebuilt coastal town of Pell Cove. 2 years after the disaster, the truck driver named Domin was redirected by the Caldena Emergency Authority within 2 hours of his message being read on this broadcast, and his 80 pallets of water reached the Crest Landing distribution point within 6 hours of the earthquake, serving an estimated 12,000 survivors. He declined all offers of public recognition and asked only to be remembered as someone who was in the right place. The island nation of Solène, which suffered the highest proportional losses of any affected territory, accepted a permanent increase in its emergency infrastructure budget funded jointly by 6 neighboring nations, a political agreement that had previously been rejected for years on grounds of sovereignty and cost. It passed unanimously in the Veldric Regional Assembly within 3 weeks of the earthquake. The mathematics of grief, it seems, can move politics in ways that reason alone cannot.
Humanity did not collapse in the face of this disaster. It did not surrender. But it did not succeed without cost. The region rebuilt, slowly, unevenly, with arguments over funding allocation and reconstruction priorities, and the rights of displaced communities. Some of what was lost in Solène, the architecture, the cultural institutions, the community networks that had existed for generations, was never recovered. The generation of children who grew up in temporary housing after the disaster carried specific and documented psychological burdens that showed up in educational outcomes and social indicators for over a decade. Caldena's fishing communities, which had operated the same northern coastal routes for centuries, largely did not return. The coastline they knew was gone. The ports were rebuilt in different configurations, and the psychological weight of returning to the place where so many died proved too great for many families who had already started over elsewhere. The map of the northern Veldric coast changed, not dramatically in geography, but profoundly in the meaning that people assigned to each place on it.
The earthquake altered the geological stress pattern in the Veldric Sea, and Seismologists issued a long-range forecast. The region faces elevated probability of further significant seismic events in the next 50 years. Governments across the Veldrick Rim implemented updated building codes, expanded early warning systems, rehearsed tsunami evacuation procedures, and built coastal seawalls in the highest risk zones. New sirens were installed in every coastal municipality. School children across Caldina, Verath, Selen, and Portova began annual earthquake and tsunami drills. The warning time achieved on the morning of the disaster, from seismic detection to coastal warning, was later analyzed and found to be among the fastest response times in regional history. It was still not fast enough for everyone. That is the brutal truth of geological hazard. Even a perfect early warning system cannot outpace the speed of the wave for people who are too close to the source. The people of the Veldrick region survived this disaster, rebuilt, and carry it forward in their collective memory. They built better, they prepared more. Whether that preparation will be sufficient, that remains, as it always does, an open question that only the future can answer.
Final toll: 26,411 confirmed dead. 1,411 confirmed survivors extracted from collapse. 3,200,000,000 in international aid. 11 days of continuous broadcast. One city of 1.4 million people that survived, mourned, and began again. The Veldrick earthquake of the first day of Blackout Radio's greatest broadcast was the worst natural disaster in the region in recorded history. It was also the event that reshaped how the region thinks about risk, community, and the obligation that the living have to those who came before. The world stabilized. The world adapted. The world carried its dead forward and kept moving, because that is the only direction there is.
From all of us at Blackout Radio, thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. I'm Maya Ross, and I'm Daniel Voss. This has been Blackout Radio. Don't forget to take care of each other.